welcome every one of you all here. I really understand that you're here supporting the Riley Institute. It means so much to me. Let me begin by introducing three people up front. First of all, the new president of Furman as of July 1, Dr. Elizabeth Davis, Carl's wife, Lynn, and my special friend, Betty Farr. If you all would stand, please. I'm also so pleased that all of my children are here, their spouses. A number of my grandchildren are here. My son Hubert came all the way from Sacramento, California to be here, and I appreciate that. As most of you know, my late wife Tunky and I were married 50 great years, and we had 4 children and 14 grandchildren. And I'll say this about them, and I could say it about yours too. They all are above average. Now, and we've also been very fortunate over the years to have thousands of friends. Friends mean so much to me, and I consider all of you all to be my friends. Some of you out there really would be considered my very best friends. And in that category, I include our special guest, President Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton and I were elected to our first term as governor the same day. He, Arkansas, and me in South Carolina, November of 1978. We worked closely together all the years that we were governors together. Our respective states had so much in common, similar challenges, similar assets, wonderful people, things to work out. Bill and I had the same vision for making our states better. And all of that revolved around giving all of our children, quality education. Tunky and Hillary shared our passion for helping children and improving education, and they worked closely with us to make our vision a reality. Then in November of 1992, Bill Clinton was elected president of this country. He called on me to chair a part of his transition team that chose all the people who would serve the government sub-cabinet, and that was a very important position, and I was so honored to do that. Tunky and I moved to Washington for the 2-month transition period after the election in November and his inauguration in January. We ended up staying 2 months in 8 years. President-elect Clinton asked me to serve as the Secretary of Education, as you all know, and I was so honored to do that. We worked side by side during those 8 years, and he provided strong international leadership. He worked towards peace throughout the world, effective domestic leadership to build a robust U.S. economy, especially for middle America. And I'll name just a few of President Clinton's very major accomplishments: 22 million new jobs, welfare reform, reduced taxes for low-income people, lower unemployment, lower crime rates, a balanced budget, expansion of and we paid down on the debt, I might add. Expansion of global markets for American products. Bill Clinton helped create the conditions for a record 115 months. That's 9.5 years of economic expansion in America. That is a great record. He also kept his commitment to improve education, reform our schools, further contributing to America's progress and prosperity. We provided leadership to establish challenging academic standards in all 50 states. We also got enacted a direct student loan program that continues to save students, their families, and taxpayers billions of dollars a year. We got almost 100% of our nation's schools and libraries connected to the internet. And again, these are just a couple of the special education accomplishments that I mentioned during Bill's presidency. But he continually worked for his vision to provide education opportunity and for jobs for all of our people. Now, President Clinton was so successful. And why? He worked collaboratively and effectively with Democrats, Republicans, and independents, always keeping his focus on the welfare of the people of our great democracy and not just some group. Since leaving office, President Clinton has continued to be a voice of sound policy, both in world affairs and here in the United States. He and his Clinton Foundation have led the very successful Clinton Global Initiative. You've heard of the effort he had in the tsunami in 2004 in South Asia, and then also Haiti earthquake. All of these things he's been very heavily involved with. Now he has initiated the Clinton Global Initiative America, encouraging public and private partnerships for building back our infrastructure that we have let alone for too long. I am so proud of his record since he has been president. But let me share one brief story as I close this introduction. I think it defines President Clinton's strength of leadership and his ability to connect with people. It was in the mid-1990s. We were in the East Room of the White House. I was introducing the president then, as I am tonight, but it was to 50 teachers of the year, the very best teachers in all 50 states. That was our audience. President Clinton came to the podium after I introduced him. He talked to them about how much teachers meant to him as he grew and how he developed. He paused a minute. He had no notes. Then he proceeded to name every one of his teachers from kindergarten through the 12th grade. Now, I'll tell you, the 50 outstanding teachers of the year in the audience were absolutely blown away, as was I. While he might know every one of you by name, I assure you that he has that same kind of love and compassion and respect for each one of you. And you know his name. My fellow Americans and friends, it's my great honor and pleasure to present to you one of my very best friends, former President of the United States, Bill Clinton. Bill?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. President Court, about to be President Davis, thank you for welcoming me to Furman. I thank the legislators and the other officials who are here. And I thank my great friend Dick Riley for giving me the chance to come here to support the Riley Institute and Furman. That introduction was amazing. That was a classic example of Clinton's third law of politics. Whenever possible, be introduced by somebody you've given a good job to. They will. They will exaggerate your virtues, minimize your flaws. It's like airbrushing history right before your very eyes. It was wonderful. I do want to say one thing seriously at the beginning and then try to avoid taking too much of a walk down memory lane. Dick Riley did that for us, but I like the Riley Institute's whole method of operation. I do a lot of work around the world today. We sell the world's least expensive, high-quality AIDS medicine in 70 countries. We have either healthcare or agricultural or energy operations in about 40 countries. And everywhere in the world, people are practicing creative cooperation, where networks of people cooperate across government and the private sector and the non-governmental sector that I'm a part of now. Good things are happening. In America, the cities that are now better off than they were before the financial crash in 2008 are places with stunning, fascinating, creative networks of cooperation. Everywhere people are fighting, good things are not happening. Where people think our differences are more important than what we have in common. Dick Riley is a walking textbook advertisement for the virtues of not giving up our differences of opinion, not abandoning our arguments, but having argument for the purpose of reaching a decision about what to do and getting the show on the road. So, I believe that he was one of the finest governors of the last 50 years and one of the greatest cabinet secretaries this country ever had. And we have been friends a long time. Today, I showed him the little silver box he gave me in March of 1980 when he invited me to come to South Carolina to speak to the annual dinner that our party put on. And he put me up in the South Carolina Governor's Mansion, which made me feel important because it's old and beautiful. And we've been friends ever since. I was thrilled when he came and agreed to handle this massive work in the transition. Our party had been out of office for 12 years. And what that means is, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat, if your party's out of the White House for a while, then you get in. The worst curse is you're going to have more disappointees than appointees. There are not that many cabinet positions, not that many ambassadorships at nice houses and limited responsibilities. There just aren't that many. And Dick Riley was a genius at making people feel good when he couldn't give them the job they wanted. He was way better at it than I was. And the longer he stayed, the more I wanted him to keep on staying. And I did ask him to become Secretary of Education, but he didn't say the most important reason. When I was going around America running for president in 1992, I like to cite this big national study which was done, which said that while I was governor in the previous decade, our state had made more progress in improving its schools than any state in America except South Carolina. And a lot of you know that in 2009, Time magazine said he was one of the 10 greatest cabinet officers of the 20th century. I thought I'd find him unbearable to be around after that happened. But he took it all in good stride. And he gave you most of what we were able to achieve. But I was just having a talk on the way in here with our mutual friend Doug Becker, whom Dick and I both supported in the Laureate Educational Network, because he told me that the student loan default rate and their graduate school, which is called Walden. It's based in Minnesota, but it's mostly online health learning, is about 4%. When Dick was there, we had the first direct loan program for, and as he said, it saved money, but I want to be clear exactly what that meant. We saved the students $9 billion in loan repayment costs. The taxpayers saved $4 billion because everybody paid their loan back, and the national default rate was 5.6%, which is only about 60% of what it is today. And those are the kind of practical things that our country needs to get back to build up our human potential and prepare people for what we need to do. And it does all begin. And it does begin with basic education, with elevating the role of teachers. It's true that I did, in front of a group of teachers once, recite in order the names of every teacher I'd had from the time I started till I got out of high school. When I wrote my autobiography, my editor made me take 30 pages out of the book that I had written about my college years. And he said, "I can't believe you cited this paper you did on Great Britain when you were 10 years old. This is ridiculous." He said, "How much of this did you make up?" I said, "None of it." I came of age when a lot of teachers, who were at the time mostly women, were basically underpaid and did it for other reasons. And we have had to live with a good news story, which is that more employment opportunities became open to more people, and we didn't want to do what we needed to do to continue to elevate the standing of our educators. So we've been in a struggle to come to grips with that. And then the economic crisis has been a significant burden on a lot of America's schools because a significant number of our parents are no longer property owners and therefore are not part of people who deal with that. And we never have resolved this whole school funding issue in a totally satisfactory way. So we've dealt with all these different crises, but at the end, just last year, there was another study that came out that said if a student, while in elementary, junior, middle school, or high school, had even one truly great teacher, that one truly great teacher could increase that student's lifetime earnings by 10% a year, just by changing the whole way they thought of themselves, and they thought of the learning process, and they thought of how they would relate to other people. And so I believe that a lot of what we tried to do in the 90s will be restored either because we believe this core curriculum is something we all ought to know, but we understand you still got to have a good teacher to teach it, or because there will be a big step forward in tying employability to education and training again. We have a school in New York that's one of my partners in the Clinton Global Initiative I'm particularly proud of because I think it's a good model for the future. It's on Staten Island. A lot of the kids are low-income kids, and it's a maritime high school. And many of the kids who come there can't even swim when they enroll. But when they graduate from high school, they have a specialty in one of 6 maritime areas, anywhere from being able to pilot a boat in a harbor, to being a deep sea diver, to being engaged in aquaculture. The students have already planted 30 million oysters in and around the Statue of Liberty to help us get the nitrogen out of the water, purify the water, and grow more oysters and bring back oyster farming there. But here's the interesting thing. Every single one of them who gets a high school diploma has a job where they can get hired the day they walk out the door, but they also have enough academic credits to get in a 4-year university anywhere in America. Those are the kinds of things Those are the kinds of things we have to lift above partisan politics again. We have to put front and center what's good for our kids. Last year we had 120,000 openings for young people in America with computer science degrees, and we awarded 40,000 degrees in computer science. Our neighbors in Mexico, and we used to think of as flowing illegal immigrants into the country or dealing with the drug wars on the borders, the previous president, Mr. Calderon, opened 140 tuition-free universities. Last year, Mexico, with half our population, produced 113,000 engineers compared to 120,000 here. We have taken our eye off the ball of putting our children and their future first, not only because it's the morally right thing to do, it is critical to every economic strategy we can have. We now have an enormous number of people looking at creative ways to help kids finance education, keep young people in school, and stop the inflation in cost of college, which was going up at 2 to 3 times the overall rate of inflation. But all these things need to be studied, dealt with, and developed in the context of people working together. That's what I like about the Riley Institute. You could brand Furman, if you will. I normally don't like that phrase, but in this case, I think it's important. As a place where problems are solved and potential is unleashed because people don't care about politics, they care about the purpose of developing the human potential of the people of South Carolina and anybody else who wants to come here and go to school. And the Riley Institute, I think, is a big part of that. In case you hadn't figured out, I'm trying to help raise the rest of the endowment. But I will... And yes, Dick, I will contribute too. This is really important. You know, all over the world, I see this when I go places. I was in Spain the other day, which has been an important partner for me in some of the work that I've done, and their youth unemployment rate's 50%. I'm trying to help Greece overcome some of its problems. It's very poorly organized, but there's nothing wrong with the Greeks. They're working, on average, 25% longer hours than Germans every week. People are not lazy anywhere, not really. But the youth unemployment's 56%. And we cannot afford in the United States to allow a whole generation of our young people to be both underemployed and undereducated. We have to begin with early childhood education and stay with them as they move through life to a seamless system of lifetime education and training. And there are lots of good ideas out there, but they have to be implemented on the ground by people of good faith who are just putting the kids first and the future first. Whenever America is in the future business, we do well. Whenever we decide to spend all our time fighting over the present, we get in trouble. We need to get everybody back in the future business. There is literally no problem we have that is not soluble. We are the youngest of all the rich economies, except for Ireland. We're younger than Europe, we're younger than Japan. If the Chinese hadn't changed their one-child policy, we would have been younger than China within 20 years. And having lost it, I can tell you, youth matters. Demographics do matter. But they only work if you're actually educating people and preparing them to succeed in the world they will live in, not the world we lived in when we were their age. So the promise of this institute is very significant. I also want to say a special word of support for the Diversity Leadership Initiative that involves people from all walks of life. I think this is really important. When young people ask me questions, I spend a lot of time going to schools and colleges and overseas as well as here. And you'd be amazed at how many of them ask me, what's the most important thing I can do to succeed? What do I need to know to really, I got all these dreams, I want to live these dreams I have. What do I need to know? And I try to explain that we live in a world that is highly interdependent, but all that means is that we're bumping up against one another, and we can't avoid having what we do affect other people and having what they do affect us. That it's really important to understand how to appreciate people who are very different from us. And I think I was really fortunate. I tell people this all the time. I think if I'd been born 10 years later, I would never have become president because there would have been a television in my house from the time I was born. And I didn't have a TV till I was 10. And I had a family that were full of really smart people who had no education. And they couldn't afford to take vacations. So all their entertainment was in storytelling. And because they didn't have an education, they banged on me to make sure I did well in school. And kept my mouth shut up enough to listen to my teachers. My sixth grade teacher, Kathleen Scher, told me that she had brought me down 2 places in my class ranking because I had still not figured out when to talk and when to keep my mouth shut. And she said, you're either going to be governor, I was 11 years old, she said, you're either going to be governor or wind up in jail, depending on whether you figure out when to talk and when to keep your mouth shut. That was my some people would say I never did learn, but I tried anyway. But anyway, these things are happening now in a way that are magical. The good news is an 8-year-old can get on a computer and find out things I had to go to college to learn. But I still think I got a world-class education around the dinner tables of my family members, listening to the stories and learning that everybody's life had dignity, everybody's life had importance, everybody's got a story. Not everybody can tell their story, but everybody's got one. And I think we have to get back to that in America. We have to get back to seeing people we too often overlook and understanding that this human potential that we have left untapped is a cost we cannot afford to pay. That we need all hands on deck in America, and the societies that are doing the best job of developing human potential through education have the best future. I was in Finland a couple of years ago, and I heard that they didn't pay their teachers proportionally much more than we did, but every single person who got hired to be a teacher graduated in the top 10% of their university class because there was so much respect given to the profession. And you think, oh, well, that's just one of those Scandinavian countries and they're all smart. And there's only 5 million people in the country, but they have students from 46 different countries now. They have a huge immigrant population, a lot of diversity, a lot of challenges with different cultures and languages. But they have managed to develop that. Shanghai in China now normally ranks in the top 3 or 4 urban school districts of the world. 10 years ago, they were just average performers. And the gentleman that was in control of it did an interview the other day I read. He was so humble, I was really impressed. He said, I really don't deserve much credit for this. What we did was simple. We realized that we had some of the best schools in the world. And what we did was to make all of our teachers better. And we lifted the bottom, and then we took our very best teachers and sent them to the toughest learning environments. And then after 5 years, our average performance went through the roof. But the point of all that is that this guy struck me as a really practical person who really loved kids and had the support he needed to do things that would bring people together in a very tough environment. That's what people are facing all over the world. I believe the young people of today will grow up in the most interesting and I hope prosperous and peaceful time in human history. I think this long decade we've had where wages have been stagnant after they went up the last 6 years I was president for everybody will go away again if we can be ready to seize the economic opportunities that increasingly will be available everywhere because of the basis of those opportunities. I think that there are places in the rural South and Arkansas and South Carolina that never got over the end of labor-intensive agriculture, that if you get universal rapid broadband download speeds and you hook people up to a global economy, will all of a sudden start doing really well. But it will only happen if we develop habits of cooperation and we're not too proud to learn from one another. And I will say, I don't want anybody to give up their arguments. That's a good thing. Nobody's right all the time. But we have to argue with the purpose of reaching an agreement to get the show on the road. And by the way, there's a lot of evidence to show that that's how the best decisions are made. If we could instantaneously somehow find the person in this vast audience with the highest IQ and escort them back to that little green room back there and say, what would you like to make yourself blissfully happy for the next 24 hours? And give it to them, bring them their coffee and rolls or whatever they want. And the rest of us stayed here, and we got fed 20 questions. We and the genius, after a day, we'd make better decisions. All the various experiences we have, all the things we know, we'd make better decisions. When people work together, they do well. San Diego used to be and still is to some extent, the great naval capital of America. But it is now the center of human genome research for the entire world. Why? Because, first of all, you can't see a genome. We got 3.6 billion of them in every body. So all the work has to be done with computers. There are 700 computer companies headquartered there now. And the universities all support the research. And Craig Venner, who led the private sector effort to develop the sequencing of the human genome, put his foundation there. The business community supports it, so everybody's working together, and it's exploding. Orlando, most of the young people here know, is the home of Disney World. Some of the old people do. I like to go there myself. And also the Universal Theme Park. But it is the headquarters of computer simulation in America. Because guess what? NASA and the Defense Department need computer simulation too. So they spend $5 billion a year of our money there. The University of Central Florida is the largest unknown university in America. They have 50,000 undergraduates because they're all the time training and changing the curriculum every semester to meet the emerging needs of all these computer simulation folks. And a lot of the faculty members are going into businesses all the time. There are now 100 computer simulation companies in Orlando, Florida. Why? Because they're working together. And it's just like education. It's like a lifetime educational effort. And I could give you lots of other examples. The Cleveland Clinic has made a list which they regularly update of healthcare jobs which will be available under any circumstances because of the aging of the baby boomers and unreversible trends in healthcare, as opposed to type 2 diabetes, which we can reverse if we will. And they guaranteed the graduates of the Cuyahoga Community College there that they will get a job. And they guarantee what their starting pay will be. So they've had very few dropouts. And they're finally beginning to diversify and grow their economy, even though they spent decades in the doldrums because of the decline of the old industrial economy there. It's all education and it's all cooperation. The Riley Institute can become the embodiment of that for Furman and for this part of South Carolina, and can have ripple effects all across the state and all across the country. And I want to get back and close on what I was saying about the Diversity Leadership Initiative. The reason that's important is you need all kinds of people from all walks of life who have a certain base level of knowledge and agreement about how the world works, so they are incentivized to learn how to deal with people who are different from them. You know, this is a rather different crowd than we would have had if we'd had a meeting like this 40 years ago. First of all, if we'd had a meeting like this 40 years ago, we couldn't have filled this auditorium. And it wouldn't have been necessary. We'd just had a smaller meeting with people in town that had money, and most of them would look like me, old gray-haired white guys in suits. I do want to say, out of respect for Dick and myself, that we are delighted that our demographic has not been entirely eliminated from this crowd. We thank you very much for that. But this crowd is younger, it has more women, it has more diversity than it would have had, and that's a good thing. It's an interesting, it's the most interesting time to be alive. But all over the world where people are troubled, if you look at this business in Ukraine now, it's heartbreaking to me. Ukrainians are being told they got to be with Russia or be against them. And if they're going to be against them, maybe they'll be broken up. They don't want to be with them or against them. They want to be independent and be a bridge between Europe and Russia, which would be the best thing for Russia. And the people running Russia now, from Mr. Putin on down, they think that their power rests in their ability to control their neighbors. I'll tell you an interesting story. Before the fall of the Soviet Union and afterward, when communism collapsed, the Russian healthcare system became a mess, public health became wrecked, and the average life expectancy of a Russian male remains under 60 years of age. Now, by contrast, every year IBM sponsors a contest in solving computer problems, complex computer problems. The contest is open to universities all over the world. Furman could put a team in if you wanted. People can enter it all over the world. The other day when I was talking to Hillary about this, I thought I remembered this, so I just asked my staff to pull me the list of the top 4 universities in this contest in each of the last 6 years. Russia is the only country that had somebody in the top 4 every year. In 3 of the 6 years, they had 2 universities in the top 4. In 1 of the 6 years, they had 3 universities in the top 4. If Russia chose to define its greatness in terms of the intellectual potential and problem-solving capacity of its people, then they would want Ukraine to be a bridge to Europe, because they would make more money, create more opportunity, build more national strength and respect than trying to impose a 19th century view of power, which was basically being able to control your neighbors. All of us are making decisions. All of us are making decisions like that all the time. Don't point the finger at them. Think about all of us. Most important discovery when the human genome was sequenced for every American citizen is that every non-age-related difference you can see in this audience, every one, gender, hair color, eye color, skin color, everything is rooted in 0.5% of your genome. Ability, the willingness to work hard, curiosity about the world, they're astonishingly evenly distributed. but structured opportunity is not. And therefore, the future will belong, in my opinion, to people who try to cultivate our interesting differences, but grounded in the simple fact that our common humanity matters more. Most people spend 99.5% of their time worrying about the 0.5% of us that's different. And I'm not just talking about politics. I'm talking about, no. I'm saying, I do it. I just watched this NCAA basketball tournament. I thought, man, if I was 5 inches taller, I'd have had a different kind of work. If I could run as fast as Billy Webster, I'd have done a different thing with my life. I mean, that's what we do. I ask you to think about that. Dick Riley's whole public life was premised on the 99.5% of us that we share with other people and trying to figure out how to maximize that phenomenal advantage. And that's when you have the Diversity Training Institute, that's really what it's about, to teach you to appreciate people's differences and then find the common thread of humanity, to act in common cause. Most important book I have read on this subject in the last 3 years was written by a Nobel Prize winning microbiologist named E.O. Wilson, who is now 90 years old. He turns 91 this year. Many years ago, when I was a young person, I read one of his books, and from that book I learned that the combined weight of all the ants on Earth is greater than the combined weight of all the people on Earth. That's a bunch of ants. So I'll save you the trouble of buying the book, although it's fun to read. But I'm just telling you what he said. He said, look, I've been doing this all my life. I've worried about preserving species and keeping the planet in balance and explaining to people why we should care whether the ants survive or other species. But here's what I know. If you look at all the evidence for the entire history of life on planet Earth, the triumphant species are ants, termites, bees, and people. And he said, what do they have in common? They, of all the things that have ever lived on planet Earth, are the greatest cooperators. Ants, when being chased by a predator, sense that they're about to get caught, and some of the ants will run up on a high blade of grass and sacrifice themselves so that the other ants can survive. Termites in hot climates build underground housing that's air conditioned. That is, they'll drill 5 holes, but they'll only go in and out of one. The rest are strictly for air conditioning. And when they're about to get rained on and flooded out, they won't go in at all. They sense it. And they send signals to each other. We all know all the different things bees do to stratify labor and to cooperate in ways that pollinate our food supply. Wilson says we people, we're the greatest cooperators who ever lived because we have consciousness and a conscience. But because we're so smart, we're prone to arrogance, and we bring ourselves right up to the brink of destruction before we finally wise up and do what we need to do. Now that's the whole book. But he said, you know, I'm really basically quite optimistic because the future is more interdependent than ever before. We know more than we ever have, and we just have to develop the human potential of everybody. And at the same time, our awareness of other people and what they can give and what they can do. That's the way Dick Riley's lived his life. When we first became friends, all those long years ago, I finally got him to overcome his reticence and tell me the story of how he managed his terrible injury and managed to stand virtually upright after going through the physical agony of dealing with it, because I had a friend who had what Dick Riley had, even younger, and was totally bent over and had to have 9 hours of surgery to keep from dying. He always knew things that the rest of us had to learn by messing up. His instinctive, intuitive understanding of human nature and human possibilities and what would work always took my breath away. And I was thrilled when he agreed to be Secretary of Education for 8 years. I was thrilled when Time Magazine finally recognized him for his outstanding performance, because all those things he told you we did when he was there, nearly no Americans know them. You know why? Because Dick just did it. And when you live in Washington, you don't get any publicity unless there's blood on the floor. And he got along with everybody. He got the Republicans to help him along with the Democrats. And he just said, let's just do this. This is good for the kids. This is good for the future. This is right for the country. We need to get back to the point where we elevate that. And so, that's why I love him. That's why I'm honored to be here. This is way bigger than Dick Riley or me or anybody else. This is about whether America will organize itself to make the most of this new century. No other nation is better suited to it. No other country should make more of it. But if we're going to do it, we'll have to do it through being creative with cooperation, not stubborn in conflict. That's what the Riley Institute is a testament to, and I'm grateful to all of you for supporting it. Thank you very much.